Yes, the man there with the suit and the white shirt.
This is supposed to help British businesses to export their produce to Europe, but this has just given the Europeans won't need to buy these fish because they can come and fish for themselves. They've got carte blanche for 12 years now to catch the fish for themselves. So that's damaged the export market.
And do you think the trade-off with reducing the checks on meats and poultry products, that kind of thing, going into the EU, that's just not worth it?
Where's the reciprocity for British businesses to perhaps fish in Europe, for example?
Okay. Now, I can see someone's got a green jacket with a hand up, but I can't see your face. No, further back. No, it's really hard to get you. There you are. Can you see? Yes. Oh, no, I can see. And you've got a sort of check top on. There you are.
Yeah. Objectively speaking, is it good for fishermen? No. But I think the Tory on the panel is using the fishing industry to exaggerate his point. When you look at the fishing industry, how much does it contribute to the GDP of this country? It's less than 0.5%. So stop being disingenuous, and you know it.
Linking very much to what the gentleman has just said, the fishing industry is contributing 0.03. I think the deal is standing. It's not a sellout. It's not an amazing deal. It's a symbolism of a first step. And pollers are saying that up to 64% of the population want a closer relationship to the EU. And I think we can move forward from that.
And even though fishing does contribute a small amount to GDP of the UK, obviously if you're in one of those ports in Grimsby, whatever it might be, this will feel like it's pulling the rug out from under your feet. Do you not have sympathy with them?
Yes, of course I do. But I think we need to look at the bigger picture, and we need a close relationship to Europe because we have war in Europe.
As you mentioned, I stood for the Brexit Party in 2019, but even someone that campaigned for Brexit, I think there is a lot of Brexit exhaustion, and we don't want to rehash many of these debates that were very divisive for the country. So I am quite sceptical of the rhetoric of surrender. I don't think that is the...
So you don't buy that then? Because that's very much how Reform are talking and how the Conservative Party is.
No, I think that most people in the country welcome a more conciliatory tone with our neighbours, but at the same time I think it is wrong to completely exaggerate this as this particularly historic moment. It isn't. It's quite thin on the ground, and there's still a lot of elements that need to be worked out. But I do think actually, to me, it is revealing of a wider failure of imagination. Of course, Europe are our nearest neighbours, are a big trading partner for us. But the truth is, for example, Germany entered a technical recession in 2023. There's huge economic stagnation, sluggish growth, low productivity.
I mean, not everywhere. Spain is doing extremely well.
Well, but a lot of the biggest economies are extremely struggling in Europe, and there's huge international markets in India and China and also the US.
We've just concluded a trade with India as well.
Absolutely, and I think that there is a failure of imagination when we constantly just debate whether we should be close or further away. We should engage with them, we should trade with them, but we absolutely should be looking at across the world and dealing with our own deep-seated structural issues in this country, which I think are actually the biggest challenges for why we have low economic growth. It's not just about the European Union.
Can I come back on the
can I just bring Tashi in first, because he's not had the chance to say.
And
I will come back to you.
From where I'm sitting, my simple view of this is that this deal is the first stage of the damage limitation. That's really fundamentally what this boils down to. I agree very much with what Zani is saying here, that we've gone from a world where we had, whatever your politics, we went from a world where we had completely frictionless trade with our nearest neighbour of a market of 500 million people to where we find ourselves now. This isn't a revolutionary deal that we've got here. And what really, really frustrates me is if Kieran is going to sit here and say this isn't a good deal, tell us what you think is a good deal. We don't hear anything about actual thing of what... And so that's the rhetoric rhetoric that I really don't buy. So the other two things to note is the lady also pointed out over here and the chap up there about the fishing industry. We do more in the gaming industry in this country than we do with the fishing industry with respect to the people whose livelihoods depend on that. I understand that. But perhaps the most damaging thing for me is this issue around the youth mobility scheme. I am somebody who benefited from the Erasmus program. I went to live in France. I learned French. I've made lifelong friends. I got to experience a different country subsidized by the UK government and the European Union. That was critical to anybody's ability to become more socially mobile.
Can we just explain, not everyone's familiar with Erasmus. Erasmus is basically, it's a year abroad when you're a student, and it's a reciprocal
any university
arrangement.
would have a reciprocal arrangement. I ended up in a beautiful place called Saint-Etienne, and it was a really transformative time of my life. Today, most children will not have that opportunity. This scheme now, Nick talking about it, they're trying to find a way of limiting it and giving people the opportunity to come here. What do the Tories and others tell us? Oh, it's free movement of students all over again. Kemi Badenoch and the Conservative Party, who got us in this mess in the first place, don't have any ideas. They're bankrupt of ideas. So, and as far as the Labour is concerned, they can't over-egg the pudding. They have to be realistic with people and say, this is only the first stage of the damage limitation, and it will probably be another decade where we probably will get to where Switzerland is now, and you'll see what that will look like, but it won't look like being in the European Union.
So Kieran, you want to come back in. What about answering Ash's question? Given that you're very clear you don't like this deal, you regard it as a surrender, what deal would you like to see?
I'll come directly onto that point about, for example, different ways and better ways that we can do things. But what I think is really important when
come on to that straight away.
when you're dealing with another country is whether you're treated with mutual respect. And when you talk about how could we do things differently, why can't we have mutual recognition of standards, which is what we had asked for? Mutual recognition, because they could accept our goods, we have continued to accept theirs. When everyone talks about their frustration with trade barriers, and I understand that frustration, what people forget is those are trade barriers that the EU is choosing deliberately to put in place to make life difficult for us because we dared to say we want to go our own way.
So usually with these trade deals, usually there's, I've never done a trade deal. But what I can see about them, there usually has to be a bit of give and take.
Yeah, absolutely. And there tends to be.
So where's the give?
So it tends to be, typically in a trade deal, you have an independent body that mitigates disputes that might occur between countries. And that's what we said we should have. And the EU said no. They said that we will let our courts be the ultimate arbiter over any disputes. So whether you believed in Brexit or not, whether you think it's a good
how would
thing...
you go around that?
This thing about the European courts...
You had a lot to say. I'd like to come back on some of those...
Let Kieran speak. Let Kieran speak.
They have said that EU courts will decide, and when it comes to how we can do things, yes, they have ultimately. No, it's not. They have said there's an independent arbiter, but the ECJ will be the ultimate decision maker on whether.
No, you're mistaken. You're not correct. I've got to correct that.
Hang on. Oh my God, this is. Do you know what? Hang on.
Such a sense of deja vu.
So am I. Hang on a minute. Hang on. Wait, no, I have. But you've made a comment about the European Court of Justice. You say you want to correct that.
Absolutely.
Very briefly.
Kieran is mixing up the independent panel. The independent panel as exists in any trade deal exists here. Kieran is mixing up having to refer a very specific interpretation of European law to the Court of Justice, which then refers it back to the panel, which I negotiated the deal here. It comes back to the panel. It says independent arbitration panel. Paragraph 29, read the deal.
And it says that the independent panel has to regard the ECJ's ruling as the ultimate arbiter.
I mean,
it doesn't.
Point about
yes.
better. For example, Ashley quite rightly raised students and the flexibility that was there for students. We came up with a better way of doing it. We said instead of just saying only students from the EU could come here, and that's the only measure of exchange, let's open it to the whole world. And we had the Turing scheme, so that the best and the brightest from all different countries outside of the EU could do exactly the same thing. What's wrong with that? Why do we only want to limit ourselves to the horizon of Europe? I want us to have students coming from all different countries who are the best and the brightest.
But therefore you don't mind about students coming from Europe?
The Turing scheme looked more widely and was quite restrictive.
Coming
What
from
they're
Europe
talking about.
is okay.
Yeah, but you can have a
Because
deal
you
with the
choose
European
countries
Union
that
and have another one
are
beyond
different.
that. That's the
All right,
point.
listen, let's hear a bit from our audience, because you've got your hands up. And you're shaking your head, so I can say, well, let's see, you're shaking your head in the green, you've got a green hoodie on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, much as you said previously, there's no reason why you can't have students from across the world. But as you mentioned, there's no reason why you can't have a separate deal with the European Union as well as one with other countries. So again, I'm sorry, you're being disingenuous, and this is just not right. You cannot keep quibbling about